Finally, 45 days after setting off, not 20, Arnold's men saw the spires and walls of Quebec City looming across the St. Lawrence River.
No one, particularly the British, can believe that suddenly they are there. Arnold, because of this, would have a reputation now. He would be known as the American Hannibal for his ability to move men over mountains to achieve seemingly impossible things.
Meanwhile, American forces led by General Montgomery had easily taken Montreal. Then, with 300 of his men, Montgomery set out along the St. Lawrence to meet up with Arnold. Together, they planned their assault on Quebec City.
A clip from the Ken Burns documentary, The American Revolution. This July 4th marks 250 years of the Declaration of Independence. And as the U.S. celebrates, there's a surprising Quebec connection that often gets overlooked. So what role did Quebec really play in the birth of the United States? And why does it still matter 250 years later? Our pleasure to welcome to our studios this morning Dr. Scott Stephenson. He's president and CEO of the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. Dr. Stephenson. Scott, welcome to our studios.
It's great to be here.
That sounds like a great job, huh? Do you love your job?
I have to say, I love my job. We're a private nonprofit museum. We're relatively new. We just opened in 2017. 2 blocks from Independence Hall, so right in the historic district of Philadelphia.
250. This is your Super Bowl this year, isn't it?
This is kind of our Super Bowl.
So for our audience here, and we've talked about it from time to time. I think we did something last September because there's a lot of 250th anniversaries happening right now. There's one involving Benjamin Franklin right now.
Like this month, yeah.
Like this month. So why don't we talk a bit about that? How do you view the role of Quebec, Montreal, and the province of Quebec, now the province of Quebec, when it comes to the birth of the United States?
Yeah, it's a story that was so important and virtually unknown, certainly south of the border among most of our audience, although we have an international audience as well. But I think, it's not been a traditional part of teaching the story of the American Revolution. It tends to be sort of like, the Pilgrims, Lexington and Concord, Yorktown, boom, we're done, as if it was all, preordained. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Are there, I love my history. Are there alternate timelines? The theory that there's alternate universes. Are there alternate timelines where things don't go the way they went down, and that we're looking at a far different North American continent?
Does anything ever go the way that we planned, right? I mean, my stock phrase around the museum, the staff hated, is what could possibly go wrong, and because something almost always goes wrong. Yeah. And that was certainly the case with the Continental Congress's view of Quebec, and what would their expectation of what would happen in 1774, 1775 at the beginning of this crisis.
So what was Benjamin Franklin trying to do 250 years ago this month?
Yeah, so Franklin, of course, had been living abroad for about more than a decade as a colonial agent. He was left England, literally in tears, realizing that Blows would have to decide whether Americans would be independent or not. That's actually a quote from George III. So They knew there was a showdown coming. It's important to remember that, we tend to think of 13 colonies that become the United States, and then, the province of Quebec and Nova Scotia, et cetera. But there were something like 27 colonies here in the Western Hemisphere. And so explaining why 13 of them become the United States and what happens to the others. And remember that the American Congress that came together in 1774, the First Continental Congress, sends letters to Quebec. They send letters to Prince Edward Island. They send letters to Nova Scotia. They send letters to Georgia, because Georgia does not send representatives to Philadelphia in the fall of 1774, appealing to them, trying to bring them in. And at this point, the goal of this movement is to restore and protect rights as British subjects. It is not yet to create an independent republic. A lot of things have to happen before that point.
Gotcha. So, so how do you view, Quebec and its role and the decisions made in this province and, the battles that happen here?
Yeah. So you mentioned Franklin earlier. So when Franklin arrives in May of 1775 in Philadelphia, back from London, Congress has already sent a first letter, which they have translated and published in French, a letter to the inhabitants of Quebec. John Dickinson, one of the members of Congress, writes the letter. They're trying to appeal to the primarily Quebecois population here. It is really interesting to read now, 250 years ago. Some of the phrases, you realize that not understanding the values, the lived experience of the people that you're appealing to. So one of the phrases that they use is that you have been conquered into liberty. So they're literally writing to Quebecois, talking about the conquest, the 7 Years' War, and sort of saying, well, you stood up very valiantly, but you were conquered into liberty, and now we need to explain to you the benefits of these British liberties that we're defending. It didn't land very well.
Yeah, it did not hit the way they thought it would hit.
Exactly.
So the response is?
Yeah, so, initially, like people who are caught in the middle of civil wars all around the world to the present day, I mean, you have to sort of think about your protection of your family, your community. They're sort of rings like an onion, Yeah. And so, it's not that there was a deep love on the part of a lot of Quebecois for the British crown, right?
That's right.
So it was not unreasonable to imagine that maybe this will be, this will land well. On the other hand, there had been generations of enmity between New Englanders, in particular, the Bostonnais, right?
Yeah.
This was a very culturally, and secular, religiously, Protestant. Group of colonies. And so there was a lot of skepticism. There were individuals who were, sort of willing to consider, well, maybe the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But of course, when the Americans arrive in 1775, we heard that clip to start with General Montgomery and General Arnold, converging at Quebec. They arrive with underwhelming military force, bearing a lot of smallpox, with no money to pay for anything. Not the greatest way to sort of win people over, to have them feel confident that you're going to actually be successful. And so that effort sort of fizzles with the assault on Quebec that the Burns team were dramatically explaining earlier. And so in the spring of 1776, that's when Benjamin Franklin and a delegation that's sent from Congress comes here to Montreal. Chateau Ramsay, plays an important role in that roughly month or so that Franklin is here, where they're trying to sort of see if there can be a diplomatic solution and to bring more of the population on board.
If Franklin could have had his way, what would have happened then?
Well, Quebec would have come on as the 14th colony, and would have had an opportunity to sign the Declaration of Independence later that same year.
Forget 51st state, talk 14th colony to
That's
me.
Right.
Unbelievable.
That's right.
How that works out.
that was on the table for sure.
What in your role, we're with Dr. Scott Stephenson. He's president and CEO of the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. As you look back 250 years, where do you put the prominence of what happens here in Quebec?
Yeah, I think it's the first. In a way, it's maybe the first disappointment of the revolutionaries, who are about, in the months leading up to their Declaration of Independence, to see a rejection of that offer. Canada will play an important role strategically as a base of military operations. And really, for another generation or two, the struggles with indigenous nations in the Great Lakes and to the west of the Ohio River will really shape the development of the new federal government under the Constitution. I mean, really into the early 19th century. So the fact that Canada remained under British dominion, the fact that the Quebecois population sort of stayed out of the fight by the large. There's one exception, of course. There were two regiments, largely of French-Canadian people who enlisted and served in the Continental Army, actually all the way through 8 years of the conflict till 1783. They were the 1st and 2nd Canadian regiments.
Was the pay good, or was this about values?
I think you cannot explain the persistence of people staying in uniform all those years by the pay, because they would often go years without receiving pay. But it's sort of the exception proves the role. That for the bulk of the population, it seemed like the best way of preserving your sovereignty and independence and prosperity would be to stay as part of the British Empire.
While I have you with us, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, how a historian views what we're going through today. You've got, and a president today that speaks in bombastic terms, 51st state, I'm going to take Greenland, that kind of stuff. When you view about what's happening now in the world and America's role, do you say history repeating? Or do you say, you know what, we've never seen anything like this?
Well, Ken Burns actually is famous for repeating a line, which I think may be originally from Winston Churchill, although I may have that wrong. But he says, history doesn't actually repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And I thought that's actually beautiful. And so, yes, I'd say as a historian who takes a long view of these relationships, I am an unabashed Canadian fan. I mean, I've spent years, canoeing in the North Country. I love this country. A lot of Americans feel the same way. Our histories are so intertwined. We've been through rough patches before. There have been invasions, both directions, right across, and may that never happen again. Yeah. And so I think that, as a historian, that gives me comfort to know that, that there are blips along the way, and may this be just another blip. And to me, also, as someone working in education and culture, leading the museum, I think the work that we're doing to actually tell these stories, to remind people or tell them for the first time if they have not learned it, actually can help. We would understand better the reaction of Canadians to language, like, talking about the 51st.
Yes.
Had we known a little bit, had that been a little more present in our consciousness.
Well, listen, Philadelphia is a gorgeous city. Next time I'm there, I will be stopping by the Museum of the American Revolution. Dr. Scott Stephenson is the president and CEO of that facility. Enjoy your time in Montreal. Thanks for making us one of your stops.
Thank you so much.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Bryan Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.